Pinball has got to be the most visceral arcade staple. It's the quintessential easy-to-learn, tough-to-master game. The player launches the ball into a gauntlet of ramps, bumpers, and targets, and is tasked with keeping it in the playfield as long as possible. Okay, just one more game. Even though pinball gameplay boils down to moving the two flippers, each table has its own nuances and complexities, specific goals that reward the player with flashing lights and points galore. Part of pinball's appeal is how it can feel random, yet it's not at all. Everything that happens on the playfield is dictated by the laws of physics. Can you bend the laws of the universe to your will to keep the ball in play? No matter how intricate a pinball machine is, it will always be bound to what can actually happen within the playfield. If you've recently noticed that your knees have started hurting, you probably recognize this screen. This is 3D Pinball for Windows, aka Space Cadet. It's one of the tables from Full Tilt Pinball and was included as a pack-in game for Windows operating systems back in the day. And it's a lot of fun. This is a solid simulation of a pinball table. The layout is nice, the ball physics are nice and predictable. One could easily imagine a real version of this table existing. It's a classic not just because of its ubiquity, but because it's a perfect example of what a pinball video game should be. Or is it what a pinball video game should be? This is Pong, an arcade game from Atari. It's one of the earliest pinball video games ever made, releasing in 1974. A portmanteau of pinball and Pong, the game is pretty much just that. It's a Pong machine that allows the ball to bounce around some targets and be struck with flippers. It simulates playing an actual pinball table, perhaps to get around the pinball bans that were still active at this point in the 70s. But at the same time, this game can't exist in the physical space. This ball, while an impressive feat of technology, doesn't act how an actual sphere would on a real-life pinball table. With that in mind, is it still pinball? If we consider pinball to be a genre, it, like all genres, is defined by a set of touch points. But pinball is different because those genre boundaries are about as literal as you can get. Compare how loose the definition of horror is and how strict the definition of pinball is. Pinball video games are attempting to simulate something physical. Accuracy is important above everything else. But that being said, a video game isn't bound to the laws of physics. A video game can do pretty much anything its developers want it to. Every game of video pinball has to ask, what is pinball? As in, what aspects of a real-world pinball table are worth preserving and which are worth throwing out for something more experimental? How far can this deceptively simple game be pushed until it's unrecognizable? Pong is a nice start, but I want pinball that's not even trying to replicate reality. I want unhinged pinball. In 1977, Atari released the C380 line of video pinball systems. These were home console games with dedicated hardware, known colloquially as Pong consoles. The C380 included 2 games of flipper pinball. There's not much to these tables. A handful of targets and bumpers populate the screen. The flippers are either extended or not. The ball acts like the one in Pong. The targets feel like breakout blocks. It's limited, but it's still cool for what it is. The C380 was the last Pong console Atari manufactured before shifting their focus to the 2600. In 1981, they released Video Pinball for the system, which also feels a lot like Pong or Breakout. This time around, the ball bounces around 3 bumpers. These 2 little tunnel things reward the player with either extra points or an extra ball. Targets line the top of the screen, and these 2 little circles act like repelling magnets, which is a nice touch. Although the energetic ball physics and the horizontal screen hold video pinball back from being a true simulation. Both C380 Flipper Pinball and Video Pinball try to recreate the sensation of playing a real-life pinball table. But through their limitations, they end up pushing the concept of pinball into new territory. You're not going to run into a real machine with these sorts of basic playfields. You're not going to see a table with these wonky dimensions. Even in these early days of pinball video games, we've already deviated from reality, albeit unintentionally. Atari would go on to make Midnight Magic, which is a lot closer to a real-life table, so the pursuit of realism was underway, or was it? A problem that early pinball video games ran into was what to do about screen size. Translating a vertical playfield to a 4x3 television display proved to be quite the hurdle. Beyond that, the limited resolutions of 2nd and 3rd gen consoles made it so the complexities of a physical table had to be simplified quite a bit. So what does one do about that? Pinball on the NES presents an interesting workaround. Instead of one intricate table, what if there were two simple tables stacked on top of each other? The player shoots the ball up to the top screen where a single bumper, a line of drop targets, two ramps, and some other targets greet the player. If the ball sinks, it will fall to a second screen with its own playfield. If the player is able to shoot the ball back to the top screen, the game will progress up there. If it falls in the bottom screen, though, it will be the end of that turn. NES Pinball also features a fun little bonus stage featuring Mario and Pauline. In terms of pushing pinball past the confines of itself, NES Pinball's greatest contribution is the multiple tables in one approach. It doesn't necessarily replicate a physical table, rather it tries to give the same sensation within the limitations of a digital format. Though there are some fun shenanigans where if a certain score is reached, the flippers turn invisible. NES Pinball isn't the best pinball game on the system. Personally, I find Rare's Pinbot to be a lot more impressive and interesting in just about every way. This looks and feels like actual pinball, because it's actually based on a real machine by Williams. By comparison, NES Pinball, while unmistakably based on its namesake, doesn't feel like an actual machine. It strays from that original source. Perhaps we could stray further. Devil's Crush for the TurboGrafx-16 has the same screen size issue that NES Pinball has to overcome, and it solves it in the same way. Devil's Crush has 3 playfields that seamlessly connect to one another. The table as a whole is significantly longer than a traditional pinball machine. There's no limit to physical space, why not take advantage of it? That scale is palpable due to the scrolling camera. Instead of crossing a barrier and snapping to a new screen, the camera follows the ball, which makes the whole game feel interconnected. While its sister game Alien Crush is also a certified good time, I'd give the edge to Devil's Crush because of this scrolling camera. The real key to Devil's Crush are the devils you get to crush. All across the battlefield, little demonic creatures scurry around, and smacking them with your pinball will make them explode. Mechanically, they add some unpredictability to each round. It also makes the game feel infested. Gross. I love it. Completing goals on the main table will treat the player with a bonus challenge, and these are equally metal. The game is filled with these sorts of gruesome details. The slingshots are these egg sac things that burst open. The top screen has a ring of cultists that you can smack around. The face in the middle transforms from a beautiful woman to a full-on scaly demon, who is also beautiful. The aesthetics of this game are so extreme, I can't help but just adore it. The elements in Devil's Crush resemble a traditional pinball table, but everything is exaggerated. We're pushing pinball away from the real world. Let's push it further. Kirby's Pinball Land is one of those ideas that just makes sense in hindsight. Your main character's a circle, why not batter him around a bunch? Sorry, Gerbs. The game follows everyone's favorite puffball as he travels to one of 3 lands to take on their leader. Since this is a title for the Game Boy, it has to wrestle with that system's small, almost square screen size. It too stacks 3 small tables on top of one another to create one elongated map. While getting a lot of points is certainly fun, that's not really the goal in Kirby's Pinball Land. Each of the screens has some little puzzle that sends the player up a screen. For example, if the player hits this cloud a bunch, it will rain on this big Kirby in the middle. He'll take out his umbrella, which will bop the little Kirby upwards. The game encourages the player to engage with these puzzles, since simply shooting the ball upwards is kind of hard to do. The player has to make it to the top screen and complete one final objective there. Once done, a warp star appears to transport our hero to a boss battle. These battles are straightforward, you just have to slam into the boss several times, but occasionally they add some spice by rendering a flipper unusable for a few seconds. Is it a stretch to call this a status ailment? After Wispy Woods, Kracko, and the Poppy Brothers are defeated, Kirby can take on King DDD. It's not exactly a retelling of Kirby's Dream Land, but it's close. Real pinball tables often contain stories and objectives, but to see puzzles this literal along with 4 full-on boss fights in a pinball game is something else. Let's keep pushing that Unreality. The same year Kirby's Pinball Land gave Nintendo kids an inventive mascot pinballer, the Sega kids got one as well. Sonic Spinball transforms the blue blur into, you guessed it, a pinball. Dr. Robotnik is up to his tricks again, and it's up to Sonic the Hedgehog to infiltrate his defenses, which looks suspiciously like a bunch of pinball tables. Like Kirby's Pinball Land and Devil's Crush, Sonic Spinball's 4 levels are laid out like huge, intricate tables that get broken down into more manageable chunks. Shooting Sonic up specific ramps will take him to new areas with their own objectives, obstacles, and flippers. While the layouts can be slightly convoluted, the rings that litter the table do the same thing they do in a platformer. They show where you're supposed to go, or where you haven't gone yet. Sonic Spinball utilizes this platformer staple in the most natural way. The goal of each level is to collect the Chaos Emeralds, which are hidden behind feats of pinball might. Collect them all to move on to that stage's boss battle. Sonic Spinball's greatest departure from traditional pinball is the ball itself. Sonic will gladly unfurl himself if need be. When he lands on a flat surface, he'll walk around and the player can control him as usual. There's this really neat corner in the first table where if the player misses their shot, Sonic can just jump right back up and try again without any fuss. If he lands on this pillar in between the flippers, he'll grab a hold of it and jump back into play. These nice little touches make him feel more alive. Sonic feels more like Sonic than Kirby feels like Kirby. Even beyond that, the player can adjust Sonic's trajectory in midair. Having a living pinball isn't something you see really ever. Sonic Spinball personifies the pinball itself. Does a pinball game need an actual pinball to be pinball? Well, Sonic doesn't have a monopoly on curling up into a ball. Metroid Prime Pinball sounds dumb as hell, but is actually kind of the greatest thing ever. The game is a loose retelling of the first Metroid Prime, only bounty hunter Samus Aran sees fit to stay in her morph ball all day. Girl, same. Each game begins on one of two starting tables, the Pirate Frigate or Talon Overworld. If the player hits Samus into one of these holographic targets, a challenge will begin. Usually this involves some sort of threat populating the playfield, and the player has to take care of it within a time limit. If successful, the player is rewarded with an artifact. Like in the original Metroid Prime, the goal is to find 12 artifacts to open the way to the planet's fiercest foes. Since this is a Metroid game, Samus is able to do what she does best: explore the planet, get some upgrades, and blast dudes. After a few objectives are met on the starting table, the player can teleport somewhere else, including Phendrana Drifts and Phazon Mines. Both biomes feature an upgrade, such as missiles or a power bomb, and a boss battle, based on a bout from that first Prime game. After that, they can teleport somewhere else and let the artifact hunt continue. I'm impressed at how much of Metroid Prime is incorporated into this spinoff. This game feels really silly, but it all works incredibly well. Like Sonic Spinball, Metroid Prime Pinball reminds the player that the pinball is an actual person. Samus will occasionally stand up for a shooting minigame, or take part in a wall jump challenge. She also has health to keep track of, which is incorporated rather well. Metroid Prime Pinball strikes a nice balance between a casual pinball experience and a collection of challenges. Leave it to Metroid, of all franchises, to naturally lend itself to pinball. Seriously, this one is totally worth checking out. Metroid Prime Pinball feels like pinball and feels like a quest. You know what else does? Pinball Quest! Released all the way back in 1990 for the NES, Pinball Quest is exactly what it sounds like. Goons storm the castle and kidnap the princess. It's up to this little ball guy to come to her rescue. Each level is laid out like one long vertical screen. The player starts at the bottom half and completes some sort of objective there, like unlocking a gate or moving some turtles. Then they move to the upper half where an enemy needs to be taken care of. These battles are simple, but they end up being some of the most thrilling pinball bouts we've seen up until this point. Each foe acts slightly different. The wizard has these familiars that wander the screen. The big lizard is surrounded by several smaller stationary lizards. And this possessed princess is surrounded by these little devil guys that pop in a small pool of blood. Gotta love some NES gore. This is a short game, but it ends up feeling like an adventure. No two tables are the same. Between stages, the player can visit the shop to buy upgrades to their flippers and or a ball stopper to keep themselves in play for longer. This is also the only pinball game I'm aware of that has a shopkeep that you can rob. Like, what? Oh dang. Crime doesn't pay, kids. Pinball Quest includes gameplay elements that can only exist in a video game form. Each table layout isn't designed for score-chasing pinball play, rather the layouts are there to provide specific challenges to overcome. Finish one task, and move on. In that same vein, another pinball game pushes the idea of the micro table to its limit. Released in 2004 on the Game Boy Advance, Mario Pinball Land is quite possibly one of the most deranged things I have ever played. Mario Pinball Land is arguably on a less fitting system for pinball due to the GBA's small horizontal screen. While a more well-adjusted game might scroll across a vertical playfield, Mario Pinball Land says, nope, we're getting weird up in here. The game contains a collection of small, self-contained playfields. Calling them mini pinball tables feels wrong though, since these arenas are mostly empty with a handful of enemies wandering around. The screens are interconnected, though it's not as straightforward as the games we've seen. The player collects stars by completing tasks, such as clearing a screen or beating a boss. Stars open doors, which lead to more stars. There's not a set order in which the stars have to be collected, but in order to complete the game, the player will need to get the vast majority of them. You can also buy power-ups from Toad, but you can't rob him. You win today, Fungus. Mario Pinball Land's map is fairly complex. Instead of going straight up, Mario travels through different doors. The player has to keep a mental map of where the doors are and a checklist of which ones they've been through. That's assuming they can get the stars to open them though. Mario Pinball Land is brutal. Like, I don't know if there's another pinball game out there that's this aggressively annoying. Pretty much every objective involves clearing the screen of enemies, which is easier said than done. Oftentimes there's hardly anything on the screen except the enemies. In a traditional pinball game, missing a shot will send a player towards some other flashy thing that gets them points. In Mario Pinball Land, it sends them careening towards nothing. Good aim has always been important in pinball, but here it's the only thing being tested. Add in some strict time limits and you've got yourself an unforgiving experience. I'll admit it, I got nowhere in this game. These snakes, I just can't get all of these snakes. Are you seriously supposed to ramp off the side of this pyramid to hit the vultures, but not enter the pyramid by accident? Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the game I want to get good at, so let's move on. We've talked a little bit about boss battles. In the games we've seen, they all follow the same pattern. Hit the enemy with the ball. But rarely are boss battles that simple. The best boss battles are the ones that test the player on how well they understand the game's underlying mechanics. There are patterns to learn and techniques to master. Overcoming certain battles can take several tries, but besting them leads to a fantastic feeling. How do we translate that experience to pinball? One of my favorite pinball video games is Epic Pinball, released for DOS in 1993 by Epic Mega Games. For the most part, it's standard pinball fare with some well-designed tables. Although, there's one table that stands out from the rest. Enigma. Enigma doesn't feature a boss battle. Enigma is the boss battle. This table is after you. Right away, Enigma looks and feels unlike any other table in the game. Its playfield is blank, save for a handful of loops up top. Targets pop in and out of existence. Nothing is what it seems. Enigma has a set list of objectives. Red gems will appear in a specific order. After hitting them all and a pair of shoes, the player progresses to level 2 with its own set of objectives. That leads to level 3 and so on. Enigma is a bit like Mario Pinball Land in that it's a test of how well the player can aim and little else. But Enigma takes this a step further by introducing mines and traps that will destroy the ball. And these will be placed in common areas, so avoiding them can get pretty difficult. It's a unique fail-state for pinball, that's for sure. Enigma actively works against you. The ultimate goal is to clear all the targets and survive for long enough to reveal what the Enigma is. And what is it? Well, you'll have to find that out for yourself. This table has a defined goal, a boss to defeat, if you will. Combined with the psychedelic background, the way each ball changes, how gravity increases, the obstacles appearing then disappearing, nonsensical targets like shoes, lollipops, and teddy bears, Enigma is a true outlier. It's the kind of table that can only exist in the digital realm. But we can push this further. Pinball is a game about physics, and physics have laws that cannot change. In theory, there is nothing unpredictable about playing a pinball machine, but in practice it feels rather random. Master players can direct the ball where they want to go, but us regular folk are just trying to survive. That juxtaposition is one of the aspects that makes pinball interesting, and it's what makes our next game both fascinating and infuriating. Enter Odama. Not to be confused with Barack and Michelle, Odama, with a D, mixes pinball with real-time strategy. Set in feudal Japan, the player assumes the role of a young general leading his army through a series of battles. But he doesn't rely on his troops alone. He has his trusty Odama. The Odama is basically a big old cannonball that rolls around the battlefield. The game makes it clear. This is just a big ball. A big ball does not care what it runs into. It will smash a building, it will squash your enemies, and it will squash your own troops if you're not careful. The troops rally around the Ninten Bell. The goal of each level is to escort it across the battlefield and into a gate by clearing the way of rival troops and stage hazards. And how exactly does one direct their soldiers? By yelling commands at them, of course. No, really. The The game was co-designed by Yute Saito, the designer behind Seaman, the virtual pet game where you use a microphone to talk to this.
My knowledge of you and your family grows ever more complete.
Odama was also bundled with a microphone and is one of only 3 GameCube games to use it. The way you direct your soldiers is to actually yell at them. Advance! Fall back! Flank and destroy! It's hard to not feel like you're bothering everyone else in the house while playing this game.
Fire! 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 Fire!
Add in some items to ration and troop morale to manage, and you've got yourself a rather complex game. Like, imagine playing like a MOBA and Pachinko at the same time. If this sounds like it would get overwhelming really fast, that's because it does. It's still cool though. Combining pinball with real-time strategy might not be the cleanest marriage. But you know what's even more out there? Combining pinball with a Metroidvania map. Yeah, I know we had a literal Metroid game earlier, but that still looked like pinball, you know? What if the playfield was one of those sprawling, interconnected worlds we've come to expect from this subgenre? Enter Yoku's Island Express, a charming game that follows a new dung beetle postman on a delightful tropical island. He pushes his ball around, as dung beetles tend to do, which can be struck with flippers and flipper-like objects all around the island. Yoku's Island Express takes place on one big island-sized map. Instead of tasking the player with racking up a big score or striking specific targets, the game asks the player to explore. Yoku, that's the little bug's name, will traverse the island in a non-linear fashion, the world slowly unlocking as he progresses through the story. Can you make it to every corner of this map and find its secrets? There's only one way to find out. Yoku's Island Express doesn't always force the player into pinball mode. Occasionally, Yoku will push the ball himself to get from location to location. It's a nice way to break things up and personify the player character. It reminds the player that Yoku is the bug, not the ball. This game features a grand mystery to uncover and some delightful characters, which is something we don't see too often in pinball. Each biome is broken up into small playfields, and each playfield has its own targets to hit and traps to avoid. Since the flippers aren't always placed in their usual position at the bottom of the screen, it makes each little challenge feel distinct. The same explicit goals as seen in Mario Pinball Land and Enigma are here, but Yoku's Island Express cleverly adds little extra trinkets to collect if a shot doesn't go where you want it to go. It's also rather forgiving when a ball gets sunk. There's a setback, but it's not going to make you start from scratch. For comparison, it's kind of like how if you miss a jump in a platformer, you get a game over, but if you fall in a Metroidvania, you just have to backtrack. Honestly, I'm surprised at how well this works. The moment-to-moment gameplay of pinball pairs well with the overarching progression of a sprawling action-adventure game. Add in some pleasing art direction and fun world building, and you've got yourself a good time. The concept of pinball hasn't just been stretched, it's been transported and found a new home. All of the pinball games we've discussed thus far have one thing in common. They all simulate realistic physics. Some are more successful than others, but that goal is always present. But remember, these are video games. They don't have to be realistic at all. Flipnik Ultimate Pinball is one of those gems you find when plumbing the depths of the PlayStation 2 library. This game is absolutely bananas and kind of beautiful. Aesthetically, it's part Tetris Effect, part Animusic, part Frutiger Arrow mood board. It's also completely insane. Flipnik uses pinball iconography, such as bright-colored bumpers, a classic silver ball, and chunky no-frills flippers. But it places those elements in increasingly bizarre scenarios. For example, the first main level in the game has a few distinct areas. There's a main hub at the bottom of a waterfall. Shooting up either ramp takes you through a long gravity-defying track that twists in impossible directions. One ramp takes you to a set of bumpers that need to be hit to attract butterflies. The other takes you to a tree that needs to be struck to shake free all the pinball fruits for multi-ball. If you're too slow, a UFO will appear and abduct your pinball. There's also a river with bumpers that can be toggled on and off and spongy hippos. Eventually, the level freezes over and the waterfall can shatter, revealing a mountain you can climb. This is just the first area of Flipnik. The game revels in its unreality. Ramps will be overly convoluted, the ball can leap if need be. Playfields will become populated with bizarre foes. Flipnik doesn't bat an eye at putting a dozen pinballs of varying sizes out at the same time, or putting multiple sets of flippers next to each other. And when it's not doing that, it's dropping pinball gameplay altogether. Flipnik holds the core aesthetics of pinball close, but experiments with everything else. It has one foot on the ground while the rest of it floats into the atmosphere, sometimes literally. There are a few zero-gravity stages because, of course there are. This is a game about physics where which way is down is a question that will be asked more than a few times. Also, the vibe of this game is just slightly off. The mix of live-action cut-ins combined with these celebratory graphics. Like, I love this. I can't tell if this is sincere or ironic, but it's incredible. All that said, is it still pinball? Sure, it uses a lot of the same grammar as traditional pinball, but the game is attempting to mold those basics into something else. Had the aesthetics been even more out there and pinball wasn't in the title, would it even register as that classic arcade staple? Before we head out, let's take a look at one last game, shall we? This is Screaming Mad George's Paranoiascape, which is possibly the most fitting title for any game ever. As the opening title screen proclaims, this is the vision of one Screaming Mad George, an artist known for his horror special effects work. Calling his output grotesque would be underselling it. Seriously, it is wild. Well, he ended up making a game for the PlayStation, and believe it or not, it's a pinball game. The player takes control of two cherub-like skeletons holding bones. Together, they strike a brain engulfed in flames through long corridors filled with mismatched flesh, bloodied blades, and low-poly monstrosities. If I describe the moment-to-moment gameplay, it sounds like pinball. Use two flippers to strike a physics object to hit targets. Don't let the ball sneak past you. But if I describe what actually happens in Screaming Mad George's Paranoiascape, it doesn't sound like pinball at all. Each level is set up like a hallway inhabited by a threat that needs to be taken care of. The player can move their little skeleton cherub guys around the environment. The flippers aren't stationary. This means that the game has a constant back and forth. Strike the brain so it flies forward, move forward yourself to catch it, and strike it again. Hopefully you'll hit what you need to and gain some ground. Each level is completed by either making it to the end of that corridor or by defeating some sort of creature sprung from the mind of a master horror artist. While we've seen pinball games attempt to replicate the flow of a linear action-adventure game, we haven't seen a pinball game literally adopt that structure. The camera perspective is unique as well. It's positioned directly behind the flippers, which isn't an angle one would normally see a pinball playfield at. It adds to the disorientation. Paranoiascape leaves just about every convention of pinball behind. The aesthetics are wild, the flippers are mobile, the stages are linear, the ball doesn't act like a ball, the playfields are littered with off-putting stuff, but it's still about using two paddles to strike a sphere. So, is it still pinball? If so, how much more does Paranoiascape or Flipnik or Yoku's Island Express need to do in order to no longer be considered pinball? If not, where did we cross that line? Did we just cross it? Did we cross it with Enigma and its shifting goals and targets? Did we cross it with Mario Pinball Land? Or with Pinball Quest? Or Sonic Spinball? Or did we cross it much earlier? The ball in Ping Pong doesn't act like a pinball. It's an impressive feat of technology, but it's merely a close approximation of how a pinball acts. The Burning Brain in Paranoiascape also doesn't act like a pinball. Chalk that up to it being a low-budget experimental art game. If the pinball in Pinball doesn't act like a pinball, is it fair to call it pinball? Pinball is about bending the laws of physics to your will. If those physics are simulated, is it still about the same thing? I think by and large these games do a darn good job at getting close to that reality, to the hard-coded laws that govern everything in the observable universe. But while they inch closer to that reality, they embrace an unreality. They do things that would be way too cumbersome, if not impossible to accomplish here in the physical world. But that's just one side of the story. Pokemon Pinball Ruby and Sapphire is a really solid pinball video game. As the game progresses, you catch Pokemon and fill out your Pokedex. That's unrealistic, right? Well, in 2026, Stern Pinball released a Pokemon table, and it's a fully fledged adaptation of its namesake. The goal of the game is to hit this Pokeball to catch various Pokemon, train them by hitting targets, and then battle with them. The game, while still bound to this physical plane, does everything it can to push that reality as much as it can. And really, this is what modern-day pinball tables are trying to do. Outside of IP recognition, why should someone invest in one machine over another? Two machines are next to each other at an arcade. Which one will you pick? How can a player feel like they've gone on a journey while playing a table that fundamentally cannot change? I played this Game of Thrones machine once. You had to pick your house and then do a bunch of stuff to battle the other houses. As one of the 11 people who didn't watch the show, I was lost, but I was intrigued by how intricate it was. It was pushing pinball to be more than itself. The Multimorphic Pinball Company has a system called P-Cubed. It's modular, so a singular machine can house multiple games. It features a screen in the middle, allowing the background to change as the game progresses. Check out this game based on Portal. It features turrets, a companion cube, Wheatley, but it also simulates the portals. That's just cool. We see this merging almost. Real pinball tables push their basic mechanics further and further. Simulation pinball video games get increasingly realistic. This relatively simple game is able to grow and transform and capture the minds of players across the world. But then you have the pinball games that don't bother with reality. They take advantage of their digital status and go where a physical table could never go. But in breaking free of those constraints, does it retain the spirit of pinball? Or are those constraints what make pinball interesting in the first place? Each of the games we've looked at today has a different answer to the question, what is pinball? That's the fun thing about genres, their rules don't have to be followed. But when a genre is based on something that cannot change, such as the laws of physics or the dimensions of a pinball machine, at what point does the genre completely fall apart? And at what point does it transcend those bounds? Or is it enough to just make the player want to try just one more game? Oh, just one more game. Okay, just one more game. I got this. Just one more game. Just one more game. Okay, one more game. One more game. Just one more game. Just one. Certainly, there are a few gonzo pinball games that I missed. Shout them out in the comments below. I'd love to check them out. If you'd like to support the channel, consider joining the I Am a Dot Patreon. There you can get early episodes as well as a bunch of exclusive videos that can't be found anywhere else. Seriously, I think there's like 50 of them at this point. Also, the channel passed 100,000 subscribers not too long ago, which is absolutely wild. I can't thank you all enough for your viewership and support. Keep being awesome.